I'm amazed by this game and I'm amazed by Vishy Anand's play. Although this game ended in a draw, it is worth looking at. Mainly because Anand with the white pieces was facing Carlsen's super solid e4 e5. This is an opening that Magnus has played all his life and has polished it recently by preparing it deeply with his team for the World Championship against Jan Nepomniachtchi. So whenever someone plays e4 against Magnus and he responds e5, I'm like, okay, let's have a look if anyone can try to even get a small edge against him. And Vishy did that. Okay, he won in the Armageddon later against Magnus. This game ended in a draw. That's a completely different story. But I would like you to think here as Anand, to guess his moves. I will ask you some questions. And also, there are some good defensive moves by Magnus played as well. So it was knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian on the board, knight to f6, and d3 played. Bishop e7. You can also develop your bishop to c5. It's more popular, but bishop e7 also played a lot. Castles, rook e1, and now d6 played in the position. So once d6 is played and this pawn is protected, you start to think about your bishop on c4, because knight a5 is going to make you lose that bishop. So a4 is the move that was played by Anand. He could also play a3, but he went a4. Knight a5 by Magnus. Bishop drops back. c5 has been played. And now Vishy goes c3, just putting his pawn here. He's going to put his knight perhaps on a3, perhaps on d2 to f1. He has b4 ideas in mind and also d4 ideas. So it's a very flexible setup. Knight goes back. Vishy puts his knight to a3. h6 was played. And Anand made a very interesting comment here. He said that the move h6 later on becomes a very important point. And we'll look at it. But I think mainly h6 is a useful move later on when you play bishop e6. Bishop to e6. You don't want ideas like knight g5 in the air. Also, maybe he's just discounting bishop g5 possibilities. Knight went to c2. And I think this next move by Magnus just feels a little wrong. He went a6. Now, wrong in the sense not that it is giving him a bad position. It's just giving white the chance to fight for an edge. So bishop e6 would have been more accurate, but maybe there is something about this position that Magnus did not like. It could be to take and play d4. That is one possibility. Or to take and play b4, which he might not have liked. But all of these positions look pretty fine for black to play. a6, and now Vishy quickly got his knight to e3. Very nice move, because when bishop e6 was played, now came a very cool move, knight to d5. So now he's put his knight in the center, and this is what black is under some pressure. Rook e8 played by Magnus. Maybe he just wants to put his bishop back to f8. See, you want to take on d5, but at the right moment. Yeah, like knight takes d5, of course, is impossible because you will lose a piece. So bishop d5, but Magnus is thinking about which is a good moment. So here's your chance, first moment. What should white play here? So there are many moves here, many possibilities. One very logical and good move is bishop e3, and I think it's a nice move. But what Vishy did is very instructive. He went knight to d2. He wants his knight from f1 to go to e3 to bolster the knight on d5 and also look at the f5 square. b5 was played by Magnus, trying to gain space, and Anand said, I'm not going to resolve this tension by taking here. I'll just play my knight to f1. So if you take, I'm fine. But I'm not going to take and open up your rook here, which will give black a very good position. So knight f1 was played. And now I think Magnus couldn't withstand the pressure that was building up. And he decided to take on d5. Let's say if he had gone bishop f8, then knight fe3, and now this move h6 begins to haunt black a bit. Because if you go for ideas like g6, bishop g7, I'm controlling the f5 square as well. Then after takes, knight g4, already white is clearly better. And in many positions, this move h6 can become a problem. So bishop d5 was played. There was another possibility, let's say like rook b8 to just wait. But I think Vishy's plan was clear. He would have gone knight fe3 and so on. Bishop takes. Now a question to you, what would you take back with the pawn or with the bishop? If you decided to take with the pawn, that is not a good move. I mean, it's a good move, decent move, but not the best. The best move is to take with the bishop. It's an interesting question. Why? First of all, if you take with the bishop, I can go knight to b8. The knight is now going to d7 and black has a decent position. Although white has the bishop pair, the knight stays in the game nicely. But the moment you take bishop d5, now black can take knight takes d5. Black has to take, because if you don't take, I'll just withdraw my bishop back on the next move and it will be a very powerful bishop. Knight takes, pawn takes. Now you will realize that knight b8 is not possible at all, because now this rook is looking here and ab5 just nets you a pawn. So you have to play knight a5. And when the knight goes to a5, the knight is a little bit cornered there, and in comes the move b4. Fantastic move played by Anand here, and now knight b7. And this knight on b7 is the entire reason why black is unhappy. See, first of all, if you leave 2 squares away from the knight, this pawn dominates the knight. And even if you move the queen and put the knight on d8, which looks like the only other square, then at a distance of again 2 squares, there is another white pawn which dominates the knight. So that is the problem there. I think Vishy could have gone queen g4 here. Very interesting. And here's a very instructive variation. You take, queen c8. I drop my queen back. King f8. Because bishop h6 is a threat. Take. Rook takes, queen f3. And it might not seem that white is better in a big way, but actually he has a huge edge. The main thing is that this knight really doesn't have squares. You can play f6, knight f7, but this weakens this entire structure and the knight still is not so well placed. And this gives white winning edge. So, but Vishy went rook e2 and his idea was very nice. He wanted to put his rook on a2 and put pressure on the queen side, not on the king side. Magnus took, and a good move by Magnus here, a5. He wants to resolve the queen side tension, but most of all, this pawn is helping the knight to get this square, because b4 pawn is its worst enemy. Vishy took on b5, and now ab4, and a good move, rook b1. This moment, actually, it's Anand, it's black to move and try to figure out what's the best move, because if Vishy wins this pawn, he would be not only a pawn up, but the b pawn is a very strong passer. Here black should have gone knight c5, and after rook b4 giving up the pawn, rook a1, he gets some play going. His pieces are active. His queen can move to a5 or a8 trying to enter the position, and black can somehow manage to fight here, although white should be slightly better. Some variation can go queen c2. By the way, you can't take here. This is just losing. Queen a8, bishop b2, rook a4, takes. And I think black might be able to survive this. But in the game, queen d7 was played, and now it's your move. What do you play here as white to play? So you can take rook takes b4. That's not a bad move. You just defend it, but you allow black to activate his rook via a1. Vishy played a very smooth move here. Rook e b2. And you cannot take here because of rook takes b4 and then b7 is hanging. So knight c5 was played in the game. Also, maybe bishop d8 was possible. And after rook takes b4, bishop b6. Maybe it's better here. It's clearly better for white, but Could also be possible to just give the pawn, and he can't take because of rook b4, and then you can take this pawn. So there were many possibilities after rook e b2. Magnus chose knight c5, Vishy took, queen came to f5. Magnus thought, okay, let's just at least get this pawn. Now his threat is to take here and attack the rook as well as the f2 pawn. So Anand goes for bishop e3. Very nice move. If you play queen takes d3, I can take, rook b3, knight c5 back, take the knight, pawn takes, and b6. And this is a winning endgame. The knight can also come from e3 to c4, settle down here, and totally dominate the game. But he took with the knight. And now another very good intermediate move. What is it? Knight g3. Hitting the queen. The queen can't go to g6 because of rook to g4. Very powerful. So has to go back to h7. Now rook b3, knight c5. You take this, and Vishy is completely winning here. Pawn pushes to b6. And here it was like, okay, Anand's going to win this. And he's played such a good game. Such a nice game to outplay Magnus. But the world champion is a fighter. He goes first rook d8, b7, rook b8, and now Anand puts his rook on b6. So you see the queen is dominated beautifully. All its squares are taken away. So therefore Magnus plays c4, creating a square for the queen on d3. Here I think Vishy's next move, he made it, as he said in his post-game interview, he played it a very quickly. He should have played queen g4. Very powerful move. Next idea is to put knight on f5, attacking this bishop and the pawn on h6. So let's say you go bishop f8. I can play knight f5 here, or even just snatch this pawn. It's a free pawn. And if you black takes rook takes d5, I can go knight f5, attacking the bishop. Let's say bishop f8, and now knight takes h6 check. Then f7 is hanged with this rook defending here. So there were many ways in which white could have put pressure, with queen g4 being the strongest, queen a4 also. But Vishy somehow made this error of rook c6. And now Magnus came in with his queen d3. Excellent defensive move. In fact, the only move here. He finds it. And then now I think Anand took a lot of time. He got a bit nervous here. He knew he was winning, but now he had spoilt it. The best try still to win was to take. And now the threat is to play d2, d1, and then pick up the b7 pawn. So you go king f1 to stop the pawn with your king. If rook takes d5, knight f5 wins, because rook c8 is very powerful. Then the bishop can no longer control this square. Like bishop f6, there is rook takes f6, bishop g5, there is h4, and all these possibilities. So, but you could start with bishop f8, rook c7, bishop d6, rook c3, rook b3, and still it is a tangible advantage to white. But Vishy went queen f1, and now after bishop f8, a very accurate move. Here Anand could have tried a small little trick like d6. And I don't think Magnus would have fallen for it with rook d6, because now white wins after queen d3, cd3. I thought rook c8. There is rook b7, takes, and d2. No. So you have to start with first rook c8. And only then after rook d8 do you take on d3, cd3, and take, and b8. So, but he could take with the bishop, and I think rook d1, queen g6, black is very much in the game. Anand took on c4, and Magnus now finished it off with accurate moves. He took on f1 first, and then he played his rook to d7. Excellent move, finishing off. I mean, the b7 pawn cannot be defended. So here takes, and here the players agreed to a draw because d5 is falling, and then the Armageddon happened. You know, there are very few players in the world who can say that they beat Magnus in Armageddon that day and are not happy with the result. But you can understand why Vishy was not happy. He was totally winning here. He played some amazing moves. I think he just kept brilliant control, starting from this point knight e3 with the knight going to d5, the other knight going from d2 to f1, and then finally taking with the bishop here, also playing b4 at the right moment, and this rook e2 move, then finding rook eb2. And I think overall the game was excellently played until a point, and the key mistake of the game happened here when he went rook c6. If he hadn't done this, he could have beaten Magnus for the first time in a classical game since 2015. But maybe we'll have to wait. And with Vishy, you never know. He's 52 and still playing so well. Maybe he'll continue to do so in the years to come. This is Sagar Shah signing off. Bye bye.